Thanks for listening to this short presentation on how HIP, the Lake Whatcom Homeowner Incentive Program, works in Whatcom County. First, a little background information on why we have HIP. Our native forests act like a sponge. They soak up rain and they filter pollution out of the water flowing downstream. We've lost a lot of our forests around Lake Whatcom, and that's created some water quality problems. These photos illustrate how much forest we've lost in the Lake Whatcom watershed. Compare the aerial photo of the northern section of the lake from 1950 to 2008. We've lost a lot of trees and replaced them with hard surfaces like roofs, sidewalks, and roads. Losing our forest is one of the reasons why we have too much phosphorus entering the lake. Phosphorus pollution is our primary water quality concern threatening Lake Whatcom. Too much phosphorus means too much algae growth in the lake, because phosphorus is a nutrient that promotes algae growth. When the algae die, the decomposition process removes dissolved oxygen from the lake, and that causes our water quality problem. Lake Whatcom does not have enough dissolved oxygen in the summertime to meet the water quality needs for biotic life like fish. This chart illustrates that we have approximately 10 times more phosphorus coming off of our developed neighborhoods than a native forest. 10 times more phosphorus means 10 times more algae growing in the lake. HIP helps address the phosphorus pollution problem in Lake Whatcom because it mimics the water quality functions of a native forest in our residential backyards. Native plants naturally filter pollutants from runoff. Thick layers of mulch help water soak into the ground. Other HIP best management practices, or BMPs, like infiltration, dispersion, and rain gardens, also help water soak into the ground. All of these things replicate the function of the forest acting as a sponge in our backyards. Now I'm going to go over some basic information on how HIP works and what you need to know to determine if it's a good fit for you and your property. Some basic things about HIP. First of all, it's a voluntary program. Homeowners voluntarily install water quality improvement projects. You can't use HIP to meet any sort of requirements from a building permit. Native landscaping is the primary HIP best management practice, or BMP, that is an option for all properties participating in the program. Staff will help determine if other types of projects will also work on your property. These include dispersion systems, underground pollution filters, infiltration trenches, and rain gardens. Please note that HIP projects are limited to these options only. There's other great things you can do on your property to help protect Lake Whatcom, but unfortunately they're not part of HIP. The native landscaping BMP, or best management practice, is something that everybody can easily do on their property. Plants are small when you first plant them, but they quickly grow in to fill the space. Native landscaping includes some additional features. For example, wet gardens are nothing more than choosing native, wet-loving plants to put in those wet, mucky areas of your yard where lawn won't grow. You could also install a dry creek bed feature. This is just simply using rock instead of wood mulch to create a nice aesthetic feature in your native landscaping. Please note that the dry creek bed has to be located away from the shoreline, creeks, and wetlands. HIP will also support some additional features as part of your native landscaping project, like temporary wildlife protection. We understand that deer and wildlife can really damage brand new plants, and HIP will pay for temporary protection for the first couple years to help your plants get established. You can also use edging to keep your mulch in place. It's a big help for most HIP native landscaping projects. Edging can really be anything that works to keep the mulch in place. You can get creative, use recycled bricks, pieces of wood you have lying around, plastic board. Here's some examples. We get a lot of questions about using native landscaping on steep slopes and how to hold the mulch in place. With HIP, you simply use edging materials like little check dams on your steep slope to help keep the mulch in place. You can also install rain barrels or temporary irrigation systems through HIP to keep your new native plants watered for the first few summers. Native landscaping is an option for everybody. Now I'm going to talk about the other HIP project types that may work on select properties. Again, staff will let you know if some of these options are a good fit for you to consider as part of your project. Dispersion is suitable on large properties, ideally with existing forested areas. You take water from hard surfaces like your roof and your patios and your driveways. You pipe it into a trench where the water bubbles up and spreads out and soaks downstream through a native forested area. You can also plant native plants downstream of your dispersion trench. Infiltration is an option if your soil types allow and have good natural infiltration rates. Downspouts can be directed to an infiltration trench, which is filled with drain rock. The water enters the trench and soaks into the ground, again replicating the forest function of soaking the water into the ground. You can put pretty decorative features on top of your infiltration trenches. We get a lot of questions about rain gardens. Rain gardens are also only suitable in areas with well-infiltrating soils. We have a special design for HIP that helps limit the export of phosphorus from the rain garden out into the lake. Here's an example of a rain garden right after installation. The plants are very small. Give it a little time and the native plants fill in and provide a beautiful landscape feature in your yard. Underground filters are just like a Brita filter buried in your backyard. A hidden media functions as a filter. Water is directed into the media, the pollutants are removed, and clean water exits the system and flows downstream to the lake. Here's some additional details to know about HIP. The Whatcom Conservation District staff is here to help you. Staff will answer your questions and offer free technical assistance. They'll help you with everything you need to do with your project, including the application and reimbursement paperwork, and they'll direct you to resources for additional assistance. Some additional details you'll need to know. The minimum project size is 1,000 square feet, or 25% of your property's improvable area. You can always do more, and most people do. You pay project costs up front, then apply for reimbursement after your project is complete. Your reimbursement budget is $1.30 per square foot of area improved, up to an $8,000 maximum. HIP will only reimburse for expenses incurred after your project is permitted and approved. And staff will help make sure you understand exactly what's reimbursable and what's not. We do ask that you sign a notarized maintenance agreement at the end of your project when you submit for reimbursement. If you own a shoreline property, HIP offers additional project options. Please talk to Whatcom Conservation District staff about what those are. Here's an example of how reimbursement budgets are calculated. In this example, native landscaping is used to improve the area on this parcel. There's a backyard planting area, a front yard planting area, and an area planted in the right-of-way. Those total 3,450 square feet. That's 3,450 square feet improved times $1.30. The reimbursement budget is $4,485. If you decide that HIP is a good fit for you, here's the basic process of what to expect. Step 1 is to sign up and learn more. You've already mostly completed that step. You have visited the website, entered your address, contacted the Conservation District HIP coordinator, and you're now reviewing program materials to learn more and decide if HIP is a good fit for you and your property. Step 2 is to schedule a site visit. The HIP coordinator will visit your property following COVID-19 safety protocols and help you get started on a HIP project. Staff will answer your questions, provide more information. They'll discuss project options suitable for your property and give you recommendations to consider. And they'll review the homeowner acknowledgement form with you. Step 3 is to design a project and submit an application. Again, the HIP coordinator will work with you to complete the application paperwork. Applications are submitted to Whatcom County Planning and Development Services electronically, and they take about 4 weeks to process. After your project is reviewed, you'll receive an email approving your project and you're ready to get started. The next step, of course, is to install your project. Again, the HIP coordinator with the Whatcom Conservation District will help you find resources and provide directions so you know how to correctly install your project. Please follow instructions to make sure your project is reimbursable and complies with your permit requirements and HIP design criteria. You can work with the HIP coordinator to develop a phasing plan to complete your project and get reimbursed in phases. This helps homeowners manage cash flow. The next step is to schedule an inspection and submit your reimbursement request. The HIP coordinator, again, is here to help you complete the process. You'll submit your reimbursement request to Whatcom County Public Works, and it takes about 4 weeks to receive a check in the mail. The last step is to maintain your HIP project. You will receive directions on what you need to do to maintain your specific project in the maintenance agreement. For example, new plants in a native landscaping project require water and protection from wildlife, and yes, some weeding, for a few years. If you run into problems or have any questions, HIP staff is always here to help you. Typically, maintenance is a little bit more intensive for the first couple years and then reduces over time. Are you ready to get HIP?